The mahogany casket was barely in the ground before the champagne corks started popping. Most families wait until the wake to start drinking. But my sister Isabella and her fiancé Greg had started in the limousine on the way back from the cemetery. I sat in the jump seat, watching them clink crystal flutes, the bubbles fizzing just like the excitement bubbling beneath their faux mourning veils. They weren't celebrating my father's life. They were celebrating his death, or more accurately, they were celebrating what his death meant for their bank accounts. My father, Elias Blackwood, had been a titan of industry, a man who built a real estate empire from dust. He was also a man who loved puzzles, mechanisms, and control. But in his final years, dementia had softened his sharp edges, leaving him vulnerable to sharks, and the biggest shark of all was his own daughter. We arrived at Blackwood Manor, the sprawling $20 million estate that had been the crown jewel of my father's portfolio. It was a Gothic masterpiece of stone and iron, sitting on 50 acres of prime land. I knew every inch of it, not because I lived there in luxury, but because, for the last 5 years, while Isabella was finding herself in Paris and Milan on Daddy's credit card, I was the one fixing the slate roof in the rain. I was the one upgrading the electrical grid. I was the one wiping the drool from my father's chin when he forgot how to swallow. I was the dutiful son, the mechanic, the caretaker. And today, according to Isabella, I was the trespasser. The reading of the will took place in the Grand Library. The family lawyer, Miss Henderson, looked uncomfortable. He kept glancing at me with apologetic eyes. Isabella sat on the velvet sofa, Greg's arm draped possessively over her shoulders. Greg was a brand manager, which meant he was unemployed with a trust fund and a heavy cocaine habit. He smirked at me, checking his Rolex, bored by the formality of robbing me blind. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and began. The preamble was standard. Then came the asset. To my daughter, Isabella, Henderson read, his voice shaking slightly. I leave the entirety of the Blackwood estate, including the mansion, the guest houses, the pool complex, and all contents therein. I also leave the liquidity fund of $5 million to maintain the property. Isabella let out a squeal that was entirely undignified for a grieving daughter. She kissed Greg. "We got it, babe," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "We actually got it." Henderson turned to me. He hesitated, and to my son, Arthur, who has always appreciated the smaller mechanics of life. "I leave the contents of safety deposit box 404. And this." Henderson reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, heavy object. He slid it across the mahogany table. It was a key. It wasn't a gold key. It wasn't a shiny ceremonial key. It was a heavy, ugly chunk of iron, pitted with rust, looking like something from a medieval dungeon. It had no teeth, just a strange, hexagonal barrel. Isabella burst out laughing. It was a cruel, hyena-like sound. "A key?" she cackled. "Daddy left you a piece of scrap metal. What does it open, Arthur? The shed? The garbage chute?" Greg chimed in, leaning forward, his cologne wafting across the table like a toxic cloud. "Maybe it opens his heart, Artie. Sentimental value, right? Better put it on a chain so you don't lose your inheritance." I picked up the key. It was cold, but as my thumb brushed against the hexagonal barrel, I felt something. A pattern. Micro grooves etched into the iron that you couldn't see with the naked eye. My father hadn't lost his mind. He had set a trap, and he knew I was the only one smart enough to spring it. "Is that it?" I asked calmly. "That is the entirety of the bequest," Henderson said, closing the folder. Isabella stood up, smoothing her designer dress. "Well, Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "this is awkward. Greg and I are planning a little celebration tonight. A housewarming. Since this is my house now, I'm going to have to ask you to pack your things. The guest cottage is going to be turned into a yoga studio. Tonight? I asked. We buried him 3 hours ago. Life goes on, Greg said, standing up and looming over me. He was 6'4", a former college linebacker who used his size to intimidate. And honestly, seeing you moping around in your work boots is killing the vibe. You have 1 hour to clear out your junk. After that, my security will escort you out. I looked at them. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply pocketed the rusty key. 1 hour. I said, that's all I need. I went to my room in the caretaker's cottage. I didn't pack my clothes. I packed my laptop. I packed my schematic, and I retrieved the one thing I had installed in this house that Isabella knew nothing about, the node. To understand the payoff, you have to understand the context. 2 years ago, my father had a moment of lucidity. He suspected Isabella and Greg were manipulating his doctors to change his medication, making him more pliable to sign over power of attorney. He called me in the middle of the night. He told me he couldn't stop them legally. They had compromised the lawyers, but he could stop them structurally. He gave me $10 million from a hidden offshore account and told me to renovate the house. I did. But I didn't just paint walls. I turned Blackwood Manor into a fortress, a smart fortress. Every lock, every light, every window, every drop of water, and every BTU of heat was controlled by a central server buried deep in the bedrock beneath the estate. And the rusty key. It wasn't a key to a door. It was a physical cryptographic token. It was the administrator key. I spent my hour not packing, but verifying the connection. I watched from my window as the caterers arrived. Isabella hadn't planned this party today. She had planned it weeks ago. She knew she was getting the house. This was premeditated grave dancing. At the 59-minute mark, Greg banged on my door. "Time's up, Cinderella," he shouted. "Get your truck off my driveway before I have it towed." I walked out with nothing but my backpack. Isabella was standing on the main porch, her phone out. She was live streaming to her 50,000 followers. "So guys," she said to the camera, panning over to me, "this is my brother leaving the estate. It's so sad when family gets jealous of success. Show them your inheritance, Arthur. Show them the rusty key." She shoved the phone in my face. The comments on the screen were scrolling fast. LMAO. "What a loser, kick him out, Bella." I looked into the camera lens. "Enjoy the party, Isabella," I said. "Make sure you close the windows. It might get cold." She laughed, shooing me away. "Get lost, loser." I got into my beat-up truck and drove down the long, winding driveway. I didn't go far. I parked just outside the massive iron gates, hidden in a grove of trees. I opened my laptop. I inserted the rusty iron key into a custom port I had built. The screen flashed green. "Administrator access granted. Welcome, architect." I waited. I watched the security feed. By 9:08 p.m., the party was in full swing. 200 guests, champagne flowing, a DJ blasting bass-heavy house music in the grand ballroom where my father's casket had stood just yesterday. Isabella was drunk, dancing on a table. Greg was in the corner, doing lines of coke off a silver tray that had belonged to my grandmother. It was time. I initiated phase 1, the lockdown. On my screen, I tapped the command perimeter seal. At the main gate, the heavy iron doors slammed shut with a clang that vibrated through the ground. The magnetic locks engaged. Inside the house, the storm shutters, hidden steel plates recessed into the window frames, descended. The music was so loud nobody noticed at first. It wasn't until a guest tried to step out onto the terrace for a smoke that the panic started. The glass doors wouldn't open. He pushed, he pulled. Nothing. He tried the window. Steel. I watched on the cameras. The confusion spread like a virus. Isabella stumbled off the table. "Who closed the shutters?" she screamed, slurring her words. It's ruining the aesthetic. Open them. She stormed over to the wall panel, the high-tech smart home interface I had installed. She mashed the buttons. Open, open, you stupid thing. The screen on the wall changed. It went black. Then red text appeared. System lockdown. Unauthorized occupants detected. Phase 2. Sensory deprivation. I tapped another key. Lighting. Blackout. The chandeliers died. The landscape lights died. The DJ's booth died. The entire mansion plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. The only light came from the panicked glow of 200 cell phones, turning on simultaneously. The screams started. Rich, entitled screams. Then, I grabbed the microphone connected to the PA system. My voice boomed through the hidden speakers in every room of the house, amplified and distorted to sound like the voice of God. Attention, I said. This property is currently under the control of the Blackwood Trust. You are trespassing. Isabella's voice shrieked back, echoing in the dark. Arthur, I know it's you. Turn the lights back on right now, or I'm calling the police. Please do, I replied calmly. But cell service is blocked within the Faraday cage of the panic room, and the whole house is a panic room. Greg's voice roared out next. He was trying to be the hero. Listen to me, you little freak. I'm going to find you and I'm going to break your jaw. I'm going to the breaker box. I watched on the infrared camera as Greg stumbled through the dark kitchen toward the basement door. Greg, I said, my voice silky smooth. I wouldn't touch that door handle if I were you. The biometric scanners are active, and you aren't registered. Greg didn't listen. He grabbed the metal handle. Zap. A low voltage, high amperage shock, enough to incapacitate a bull, but not kill it, surged through the handle. Greg flew back 5 feet, landing on his ass, screaming like a child. He curled into a ball, sobbing, holding his hand. Greg, Isabella screamed. Oh my God, he's killing us. I'm not killing anyone, I announced. I'm just securing my asset. Phase 3, the liquidation. For the next 3 hours, I let them stew. The temperature in the house began to drop. I set the HVAC to 50 degrees. The guests were shivering in their cocktail dresses. The toilets stopped flushing, water main valve closed. The Wi-Fi was dead. Finally, I saw Isabella huddled near the fireplace, trying to burn antique books to get warm. She was crying, her makeup was smeared, she looked broken. I activated the video screen above the fireplace. My face appeared, lit by the glow of my laptop. Arthur, she sobbed, running to the screen. Arthur, please, we're freezing. People are sick. Let us out. I can't do that, Isabella, I said. You see, the house detects intruders, and since you don't have the key, the house thinks you're a burglar. I have the deed, she screamed, waving a piece of paper. Daddy gave it to me. Daddy gave you the structure, I corrected. Read the fine print, Isabella. Clause 14, Section B. The ownership of the residential structure is subject to the land lease held by the Blackwood Trust. Isabella froze. What? You own the bricks, I explained. I own the land, I own the water pipes, I own the electrical grid, I own the road you drove in on, and I own the security system that is currently keeping you safe from the outside world. I held up the rusty iron key, and the rent, I continued, is overdue. Greg limped into the frame, holding his burnt hand. The arrogance was gone. He looked small. What do you want, Arthur? We'll give you money. Just open the damn doors. I don't want your money, Greg, I said. I want a confession. Confession for what? I want you to tell the camera and the live stream that I just reactivated on all the smart TVs in the house, how you forced Dad to change the will, how you threatened to put him in a state home if he didn't sign. Isabella went pale. I have the audio logs, Bella. I lied, partially. The house records everything, but I want to hear you say it. Say it and the doors open. Refuse, and the temperature drops to 40 degrees. Isabella looked at the guests. The elite of the city was staring at her, shivering, judging. They weren't her friends anymore. They were hostages of her greed. "Tell him," a woman in a fur coat shouted. "Just tell him so we can leave." Isabella broke. She slumped against the mantel. We told him he was losing his mind," she whispered. "We told him he wouldn't remember us. We made him sign the papers when he was confused." "Louder," I commanded. "We tricked him," she screamed, tearing at her hair. "We tricked him. Are you happy? We wanted the money. We're broke. Greg owes owing debts to bad people. We needed the house to pay them off. Just let us go." I smiled. "Thank you." I hit a button. System unlock. The steel shutters groaned and retracted. The front doors clicked open. The lights flickered back on, blinding them. But the party was over. As the guests stampeded out, stepping over spilled champagne and broken glass, they were met with flashing lights. Not the paparazzi, the police. I had called them an hour ago. I had sent them the recording of the confession while Isabella was screaming it. Fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. I walked up the driveway as the officers were handcuffing Greg. He tried to struggle, but the officer slammed him against the hood of the patrol car. Isabella was sitting on the steps, weeping into her hands. She looked up and saw me. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I still own the house." "Actually," a voice said from behind me. It was Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. He had arrived with the police. "The confession you just made invokes the unworthy heir doctrine. Isabella, by admitting to fraud and coercion to obtain the inheritance, you have legally forfeited your claim. The estate reverts to the secondary beneficiary." Isabella looked at me. Her eyes were wide with horror. "You?" she gasped. "Me," I said. I walked past her, up the stone steps of my house. I stopped at the massive oak front door. I took the rusty iron key out of my pocket. I inserted it into the hidden keyhole under the handle that nobody else knew existed. Click. I turned back to her. "Get off my property. You're trespassing." Epilogue. 6 months later, the renovations were complete. I had removed the gaudy chandeliers Isabella had installed and restored the original ironwork. The house was quiet, peaceful. I was in the library, working on a new security protocol for a client in Zurich, when my phone rang. It was a number I had blocked, but it was coming through a burner phone. I answered. "Arthur?" It was Isabella. She sounded rough. The background noise sounded like a busy diner or a shelter. "Arthur, please don't hang up. Greg left me. The lawyers took everything. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch, but I have to leave tomorrow. I'm your sister." I looked at the portrait of my father hanging over the mantel. I remembered the way she laughed at his funeral. I remembered the rusty key comment. "I don't have a sister," I said calmly. "She died the day she chose money over family." "Arthur, wait. I just need a few thousand, just to get an apartment. Please. The house is worth 20 million. The house isn't for sale," I said. "And neither is my forgiveness." I hung up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the immaculate lawn. I touched the rusty key that now hung around my neck on a titanium chain. I poured myself a glass of my father's favorite scotch. I raised it to the empty room, to the smaller mechanics of life, I whispered. And then I engaged the night locks. The house hummed in response, safe, secure, and finally mine.